Hey friends, welcome back to the Holistic Health Podcast. Hey, I've got a really fun way we're going to start this episode.
Okay.
So I asked
I'm scared.
ChatGPT, you should be. It's actually a game that's not to your strength. So I asked ChatGPT if they could come up with a bunch of quick, quick fire questions for us to answer that are health
Hmm.
related.
Oh,
Some of
Jesus.
them I'm like, easy answer. Otherwise, other ones I'm like, I don't know what you're going to choose. But my imposed rule is you must answer like straight away and basically one line. Don't try and justify your choice. Don't tell us why the mitochondria like the methylation and why the like
Oh my God.
no scientific explanation needed. This is
Okay.
also through the lens of pure joy, not thinking about what is the healthiest for you.
Oh man, you're asking an awful lot of me on a
Shit, I know.
Friday morning.
Hey. So
But okay, I'm willing. I'm willing. Don't know if I'm able, but I'm willing.
and everyone, you can play along as well to answer these. All right. If you had to pick a superfood to eat every day for the rest of your life, which
Mm,
one would you choose?
garlic. Easy. What about you? Ah,
Yeah,
nice.
thank you. We weren't that far off each other going
We're
down
off to
the
a good start
novel
here.
herb situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Would I know your answer to this one? Would you rather give up coffee? Actually, I'm going to say, would you rather give up all beverages except water or give up 8 hours of sleep a night once a week?
I would never give up my sleep.
Yep, I thought that would be your answer. Same.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What's the weirdest or most unexpected thing you've ever tried for your health?
Oh, I've done some weird shit, but one thing I did do, which I am not telling anybody else to do, in fact, I would discourage you from trying this, but when I was really sick with breast implant illness, or when I was recovering and neuroinflammation, I was actually tight lining with frankincense, diluted frankincense oil. So what that means is, I mean, I'm sure all the girlies know it's where the eyeliner goes, like on the bottom rim of the inside of your eye. But I was actually putting diluted frankincense oil, diluted with coconut oil along there because you can absorb things through your eyes into your brain. And it was really fucking good.
Wow. I'm
Yeah.
not trying that, but good for
But
you.
don't nobody else try that. But I was desperate and it helped.
I actually, the things that I thought were weird back in the day aren't weird now. Like I was doing coffee enemas when it was really like I didn't know anyone else that was my age doing them. So that felt like a weird thing. And same, I went through a phase when I didn't have my degree yet, but I was eating just like plain sautéed liver for breakfast.
Wow.
And I will never do that again.
I have never done that.
All right. So, if exercise didn't burn calories or build muscle, would you still do it? And what type would you choose?
I would definitely still do it because it feels good. And I would just dance.
I love that. I'd
Mm.
surf for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and
I'd
are
surf if I
you,
could, so I'm choosing dancing.
you can do it. Just takes a
One
really
day.
fucking long time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. One day when
And
I
you,
grow up, I'm going to surf
yeah,
like Nat.
great. That sounds good. Are you more of a morning sunlight person or a cozy nighttime routine person?
Oh, I used to be nighttime. I'm a morning girly now, and I know you are too.
I sure am. I'm useless at nighttime. Don't ask me anything past about 6 p.m.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Sunset, it's over.
Yeah, I even say to Bo sometimes, I can't answer questions, but I can listen to you speak.
Yeah, I know
How
that
good's being
feeling.
married to me?
Yeah,
Yay!
yeah.
Such
Riveting.
great chat. Okay, last one. What's your ultimate healthy-ish guilty pleasure snack?
Ooh, probably dark chocolate or like dark chocolate bliss balls, anything chocolatey.
Yeah, okay. I'm such a savory person, so I'm gonna go. I don't know if people have these as snacks, but hot chips. Um,
Yeah. Did you say healthy-ish?
yeah, I know.
Tryptophan, serotonin, yay. Yeah, fair enough.
And go back and listen to our episode on carbs for the
Yeah, yeah.
benefits.
Yeah, fair enough.
I will die trying to justify my carbohydrate love. Okay, cool. Well, that was
Fun.
fun. Thank you for entertaining me. Let's dive into the chat. So, where I thought we would start with this conversation around unpacking heavy periods is first to just define what a heavy period actually is, because of course you've only ever existed and lived in your body, and so it's very hard to know what is a heavy period. And I think most women tend to compare it either heavy relative to their own period or heavy relative to their mum, their sister, their aunt, someone like that, where they've had that conversation.
Mm,
So, from more of a specific perspective, I would say that anything above about 60 to 80 mils of fluid loss across all days of your cycle is considered a heavy period. So
mm,
obviously, even in saying that, that's like, all right, well, do you have a measuring cup out that you're holding under there every month? No, I do not. However, there's ways to guesstimate this. So depending on what you use, if you use a menstrual cup, they come, they're defined mil. They hold a defined amount of mil, so you can calculate that based on how often you change it across all days of your bleed. If not, if you use tampons or pads, period undies are a little bit harder to calculate, to be fair, because you can't often see that
mm,
as clearly, because most of us are wearing black ones and it's very
mm,
difficult to see. So, unfortunately, they're not a great way to measure or gauge the fluid loss as an
mm,
exercise in seeing how much you're losing. They're still a good option. But if you are someone who's using tampons or pads, so one regular tampon or pad, when fully soaked holds about 5 mils. If it's a super tampon or pad, it holds 10 mils. So, and the other thing to consider here is that you need to account for the fact that most of us aren't going to pull every single tampon out or take every pad off and change it when it's fully soaked. So there is a lot of guesstimating in this, but that's why it's a bit of a range in terms of 60 to 80 mils. So that's a good way to gauge it. The other thing that's quite obvious is if you're having to change, your tampon or your pad every, hour or two throughout your whole period, that's probably another hint that it might be on the
mm,
heavier side. So I think
mm.
it's just important to be aware of that. And then going into some of the causes of heavy periods is what we'll do now, because there are quite a few, and not everyone has the same cause. Sometimes they can coexist, as in you can have more than one. So these are all great things for you to look into. But do you want to kick us off with the first
Mm.
one that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say too, obviously, everybody, this is a podcast episode, not a medical lecture. So we're not going through every single possible cause, but this is really, I guess, the most common things that we see in practice and as a place to kind of start as far as screening our clients for. So, one of the most common ones is high estrogen. And when we talk about estrogen, it can be just objectively elevated. It can also be relative to progesterone, which we will talk about later. And when it comes to high estrogen, it's often a result of poor estrogen metabolism, meaning the body isn't clearing it at the same rate that it's being produced. And estrogen has, many different functions in the body, but as far as the endometrial lining goes, which is the part we shed each month or roughly each month with a period, estrogen's role is really to nurture and nourish and grow the endometrium. It's a stimulatory hormone that, as the follicles are developing in preparation for ovulation, the ever increasing levels of estrogen is thickening up and densifying the lining to provide a nourishing home for a fertilized egg, or in the event that there is one. So when we have excess estrogen, which could be, sluggish elimination of our primary estrogens, or we have secondary estrogen metabolites kicking around because of poor detox through the liver, we end up with extra thick lining, more tissue, more blood, more to shed when the period comes. The other thing is estrogen does upregulate vascularity in the endometrium, so the blood flow as well as prostaglandin production. I mean, loosely, estrogens often referred to as inflammatory, progesterone is anti-inflammatory, and the body uses inflammatory molecules for cell signaling. Inflammation, in and of itself isn't necessarily problematic, but what we can see when we have high estrogen levels, whether it's primary or secondary metabolites, we can then start to see higher prostaglandin levels and higher blood flow and blood supply to the area, which there's a lot of like secondary issues that can happen with that. We're also going to talk about one of those today, but that also adds up to a heavier flow and sometimes more cramps when it comes time for the periods. If anyone comes to see either Nat or I with a symptom of heavy periods, screening for estrogen metabolites is definitely part of the workup. But it's not the only thing, is it, Nat?
Definitely not. So the other one can be low iron, and to be fair, it's a bit of like you can get into a bit of a vicious cycle with it because obviously having heavy periods can cause low iron. But if that iron deficiency is quite severe through a lot of indirect mechanisms, it can also contribute to those periods being heavy. So it is a very simple thing to get checked in terms of iron deficiency. And I think it's a really important one to have a look at. We've done heaps of episodes on iron deficiency and correcting levels, etc. So go back and have a listen to some of those episodes. But it is one that I would really encourage you, if you've got heavy periods, to get checked out. And even if it doesn't end up being a primary driver of your heavy periods, if you've had heavy periods for a prolonged period of time, it is something that's going to be necessary for you to correct, especially while you're trying to figure out why you've got those heavy periods, because the more heavy that blood loss, that period is, the more blood you lose, the more iron you lose. So if you don't address it at the same time, you just end up, really far down the road, and it's much harder to correct iron when it's super, super, super low than it is to try and optimize something that is beginning to, not be in a particularly ideal place.
Yes, it is such an awful catch-22, isn't it? If you weren't low in iron prior to heavy periods developing, you then will be, and it just makes things so much worse. So much.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
Yep. All right, what's up next?
All right, up next we have insufficient progesterone levels, and I feel like it's definitely become the theme for this month. We just did an episode on 5 signs your progesterone is low 2 episodes back, and we definitely talked about heavy periods being one of those red flags, and that's because progesterone's role is to balance out the impact of estrogen throughout the cycle. And with optimal levels of progesterone, it can oppose estrogen and really limit its like hypertrophic effects, if you like, its ability to stimulate the growth of the endometrium, and really kind of over-engineer the endometrial lining, if we can call it for that. And really the role of progesterone in that second half of the cycle, of course, it elevates basal temperature, which is how we can obviously track whether you're ovulating and whether you're making good amounts of progesterone, which is important even if you never plan to procreate, but especially if you are. And progesterone really helps to stabilize the endometrium and hold it in a state that is conducive to embryonic implantation. And so when progesterone is low, it becomes more fragile and unstable. It can break down more quickly and more irregularly. We mentioned in that last episode on progesterone, like spotting leading up to your period is a red flag. Also, progesterone's impact on estrogen in terms of balancing it out also helps to really keep a lid on prostaglandin production. Prostaglandin being, hormones that can ultimately, in this context, relate to pain. And so it really helps to just calm things down, reduce excessive contractions, excessive blood vessel dilation, and vascular delivery, which then helps to limit heavy flow and bleeding, and also cramping to some degree. And as Nat said, you can actually have more than one of these things. I mean, arguably, many women that I'm sure you've also seen, Nat, actually tick all three of these boxes that we've just talked about. So getting on top of heavy periods, of course, always means looking for the root cause, but it's often addressing some of these key fundamental parts. But beyond that, there are some structural things that could also be important. So, what have you got for us there?
Yeah, I think the other one that's like pretty common is fibroids. So, for anyone who hasn't heard fibroids before, they're basically little growths, and there's different types of fibroids, and depending on the type you have, does to a degree influence how likely they are to be significantly contributing to the heaviness of your bleed. So think, and the way that you figure out if you've got a fibroid or not is by getting a scan, like an ultrasound, and they can actually
Mm,
see if they're there, whereabouts they're located, if they are there, and that's something that would be an important thing to rule out. But basically, the reason why fibroids can be a cause of heavy periods is for a few reasons. For starters, they kind of change the surface area and the shape of the uterus, and via a few steps, they then lead to sometimes prolonged bleeding. So you're bleeding for
mm,
longer, so that you're basically losing more blood, and often that is heavier.
mm,
They also can create create more blood vessels. There's a process in your body that's called angiogenesis, and it's basically the scientific term for saying that we're creating new blood vessels, and more blood vessels does potentially mean more bleeding with that. Also,
mm,
fibroids can also contribute to higher estrogen, which then can contribute to a thicker endometrium, which is that lining that we're shedding each month. And therefore, if it's thicker, we're going to, have a heavier bleed by default. So there's a few other mechanisms, but that's enough for, for today. But what I was going to say is the type and where they are do influence things, as I said earlier. So if you've got
mm,
what's called a submucosal fibroid, they're the most likely to cause heavy bleeding. If
mm,
you've got what's called an intramural fibroid, that can, but it's less likely. And then other ones where it's called subserosal, which means it's outside of the uterus, that usually isn't the main type that contribute to heavy bleeding. And as you can see or hear, that's the reason why actually having an accurate diagnosis of like, okay, is it there? What type is really helpful, so that you can then either rule it in or rule it out and treat it depending on, what's coming up.
Yeah, and of course, elevated estrogen levels drive fibroid production. So you end up in that like horrible
Penalty.
catch-22. And when you're getting investigated for that, a couple of other little things that might also contribute to heavy bleeding is adenomyosis and even like endometrial polyps. Even though polyps are quite tiny, they tend to be really vascular, which means they can bleed quite a bit. So, yeah, definitely worth looking into all of those things.
Yeah. So I guess if we've kind of already spoken to this in the sense of like going about the process of figuring it out. But if you had
Mm,
to summarize it in a succinct way, what would
mm,
you say are like three kind of steps to figure out if you
mm.
have heavy period, like what your cause of heavy periods are?
Okay, all right. Am I summarizing all three?
Oh, no, you do one. We'll go one for
Okay,
one. So
we're going to play ping pong. All right.
let's
So
ping pong.
let's ping pong it. Well, the first and most accessible thing to look at is iron. Get your iron tested. Get full iron studies, not just ferritin. So when you go to get your iron checked, just make sure you ask your doctor to do the full iron studies, not just ferritin. You can also order blood tests on your own. We've done a couple of episodes on that. being said, you do need a practitioner to actually take you through that. So either way, you're going to need to connect with a practitioner just to have that assessed. But that would be the first, the quickest, the easiest. And then from there,
Number two, I've got the bat. Okay, I'm ready. So, number two would be to check your hormones. So, in particular, estrogen and progesterone in your luteal phase. So, about 5 to 7 days after you've ovulated, or if you have no idea when you ovulate, but your cycles are pretty regular, a second best way of doing that or measuring that would be testing it about 5 to 7 days before you expect to get your period based off your most recent cycle length. Um, and then, you're looking for a balance between those hormones, and you're also looking to see that estrogen is not significantly elevated. And in relation to that, around specific numbers, I've got a free hormone testing guide. If you sign up to my newsletter, you can access that. And specifically relating to progesterone, we'll be talking all about number specifics when we do our upcoming masterclass. So if that does interest you, we'll share a little bit more about that at the end. But it's really important that you get the timing right. So do, like, if, for example, this happens from time to time, you're planning to get it done, something happens, and you're like, oh, I wonder if it matters if I just go, a little bit later, a little bit earlier. It really does. I know it's super annoying. And also, you don't want to waste your time, your money, your effort, or get results that you can't, rely on. So, timing is absolutely of the essence with these things.
Mm, yeah, totally. It really is. And then I guess once you've done that, or alongside that, if you're ticking a lot of these boxes, then I would be looking at getting imaging done. And that is most likely going to look like an ultrasound. And as annoying as this is, a transvaginal ultrasound is really going to give you, alongside one that's done from the outside on your belly, is going to give you the most information. Of course, if any anomalies are found, you might end up with looking at a biopsy or an MRI or whatever else, and that's obviously in the hands of the specialist to guide you through that. But certainly, I think the sooner those things are picked up, the sooner you can address the root causes and also get some relief from whatever is going on.
Yep, I love it. And then as a final bonus step for everyone listening today, because it's time sensitive and relevant, as I said, we are running a progesterone masterclass on the 3rd of November. So in about a month's time, or just under, or it could be just under, because we're recording this a little bit ahead of time. So you can calculate that, go do some math. And the reason why this is such a good room to be in is because progesterone is relevant for everybody that is still of menstruating age and has a regular or irregular period. And the reason that is because it's something that's relevant to our health, our vitality, as a woman, regardless of whether or not you have children, you want children, it doesn't matter. Of course, it's relevant to um, pregnancy and conception as well, but it is not exclusive to that. And so in the masterclass, we'll be going into detail around how we actually make it, how and when to test it, and we will be giving specific numbers. We will be being as specific as we would be with our one-to-one clients in this closed masterclass, because we have the ability for you to ask questions and check with us at the end, which we don't have, the ability to do on the podcast, which is why sometimes we are sticking to general information so that we don't miss you there. We'll also be getting quite specific around what you can do about it if you do suspect or confirm that you've got low progesterone, and not just in a way of just take this supplement, but we'll also be going into detail around dietary changes, lifestyle tweaks. We'll be going into the specific, top picks of our favorite nutrients we use with our clients. We'll be going into the top herbs that we use with our clients. And as I said, we're going to, and we're so excited about this, by the way, actually have, a little time for questions and answers, which is so fun because we know and love that so many of you listen and tune in to the podcast. And it would be so cool to have some of you in the room with us and get to connect. So, yeah, if you want to join that, there's an early bird special on at the moment. You can find the link in the show notes, or it's also in my Instagram bio. And it's very low cost, but very maximal education. And we will also be giving you some bonus resources off the back of that, including some progesterone boosting recipes too, which are just good for your hormones. So if progesterone's
Mm,
not your problem, they're also just great for that.
yes. Oh my gosh. Well, progesterone literally is our superpower as women. And I think in this modern day and age, we're really up against it, trying to make optimal levels. And I really think it's a huge part of why so many women experience issues with sleep and stress and anxiety. And it's just really upsetting, to be honest, that we're all kind of operating at suboptimal levels, because it just doesn't have to be that way. So please come along and let us support you in feeling your absolute very best. We can't wait to see you there.